culture isn't just entertainment. It's the lens through which millions see the world. But what if the stories we grew up believing were never true? What if myths, rumors, and half-truths didn't just entertain us, but actually rewrote history itself? From Marilyn Monroe's mysterious final hours to the infamous moon landing conspiracy, we're counting down the top 10 pop culture myths that altered history forever. These myths weren't just whispers in the background. They became powerful forces that shaped how generations thought about celebrities, history, science, and even politics. Some myths fueled conspiracy theories that still haunt us today. Others created cultural panics, dividing families and sparking debates in classrooms, living rooms, and courtrooms. And the most shocking part? Many of us still half believe some of them, even when the truth is right in front of us. So let's dive in and see how these 10 myths managed to change history forever. It's one of the most persistent myths in Hollywood lore that Marilyn Monroe's final phone call before her tragic death in 1962 was to President John F. Kennedy. The image is powerful. Monroe, alone in her home, dialing the most powerful man in America for one last desperate plea. It's cinematic, it's heartbreaking, and it's completely unverified. No official call records prove this happened. Yet for decades, gossip magazines, conspiracy theorists, and even serious biographers have repeated it, fueling the idea that Monroe's death was tied to her alleged affairs with JFK and his brother Robert. The myth gave rise to darker theories, that she knew too much, that she was silenced, that her death wasn't accidental at all. Whether or not you believe the conspiracies, the idea of that final phone call reshaped Monroe's legacy, turning her from Hollywood's golden girl into a tragic pawn in political intrigue. That's the power of a myth. It fills the gaps in history with drama we can't resist. In the late 1960s, Beatlemania was at its peak. But then, a bizarre rumor spread. Paul McCartney had died in a car crash in 1966, and the band secretly replaced him with a lookalike. Fans scoured album covers for clues. On Abbey Road, Paul walked barefoot, out of step with the others. Proof, they said, that he was the corpse in a funeral procession. On Sgt. Pepper's, flowers spelled out a hidden message. And when you played certain tracks backwards, listeners swore they could hear creepy phrases like, "Paul is dead." The rumor grew so massive that Paul himself had to appear on television and in magazines to prove he was alive. But the myth left a permanent mark on pop culture. It showed how fans could create their own alternate realities, a foreshadowing of internet conspiracy culture decades later. And even today, some die-hard believers cling to the idea that Paul McCartney, the man touring the world, is nothing more than an imposter. August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was pronounced dead at Graceland. But for millions of fans, the king never really left the building. Almost instantly, sightings began popping up. Elvis pumping gas in Michigan, Elvis working as a truck driver, Elvis hiding out in witness protection. Tabloids ran wild with headlines, "Elvis spotted." Lookalikes fueled the fire, while conspiracy authors argued the official story didn't add up. The myth became bigger than Elvis himself. For some, believing Elvis faked his death was a way to hold on to him forever. For others, it was proof that celebrity culture had reached the point where stars could never truly die, at least not in the public imagination. The Elvis myth influenced countless films, jokes, and even academic studies. Decades later, his ghost still haunts diners, festivals, and Vegas impersonator shows. Elvis may have left us, but the myth ensures he's immortal. Imagine a man with barely any formal education, writing some of the greatest works in the English language. For centuries, critics have doubted whether William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon really authored the plays attributed to him. Alternative candidates like Christopher Marlowe, Francis Bacon, and even Queen Elizabeth I have been proposed. This myth reshaped how generations of students and scholars viewed literature. Instead of celebrating genius, It fed suspicion. Maybe Shakespeare was just a front for someone else. Even Hollywood got in on it with films like Anonymous, which suggested a nobleman secretly penned the plays. While no hard evidence has ever proven the theory, it persists because the myth taps into something deep: our disbelief that a common man could create immortal art. And so, every time someone questions Shakespeare's identity, the myth rewrites literary history all over again. Few myths are as unsettling as the Mandela effect, the strange phenomenon where large groups of people remember the same false event. It's named after Nelson Mandela because millions of people around the world swore they remembered him dying in prison in the 1980s. In reality, he lived until 2013. The Mandela effect didn't just shake people's faith in their memories, it sparked wild theories about alternate dimensions and timelines. People pointed to other examples: the Berenstain Bears spelled with an A instead of E, Darth Vader supposedly saying, "Luke, I am your father," or Monopoly's mascot wearing a monocle that never existed. This myth has done more than confuse us. It's made us question reality itself. How can so many people misremember the same thing? The Mandela effect turned memory into a pop culture mystery, blurring the line between psychology, conspiracy, and science fiction. When Walt Disney died in 1966, rumors swirled almost immediately that his body hadn't been buried, but frozen, waiting for the day science could bring him back. The myth spread so widely that entire generations grew up believing Walt was secretly hidden in a cryogenic chamber beneath Disneyland. Of course, Disney was cremated, but the story was so sticky that people began to suspect even stranger motives. Some conspiracy theorists claim that Disney released the movie Frozen not just as a fairy tale musical, but to bury the search term Disney Frozen on Google. Whether you believe that or not, the cryogenic myth shows how people are desperate to imagine that visionaries like Walt Disney could somehow cheat death. The man who gave us timeless fantasy became part of one himself. In the 1990s, as games like Mortal Kombat and Doom gained popularity, a moral panic erupted. Politicians and parents accused video games of causing violent behavior in children. Senate hearings were held, and even the U.S. Supreme Court debated the issue. But decades of research have shown that while video games can be immersive and sometimes aggressive in tone, there is no strong link between playing them and committing real-world violence. Yet the myth persisted, influencing laws, ratings systems, and public perception of gamers. The myth's impact was massive. It shaped an entire generation's relationship with technology, made parents fearful of arcades and consoles, and gave politicians an easy scapegoat for complex social issues. Even today, whenever a violent crime makes headlines, the old myth about video games is still dragged out. That's the staying power of pop culture myths. They're almost impossible to kill. October 30th, 1938. Orson Welles' radio broadcast of War of the Worlds told the story of a Martian invasion in such a realistic way that people supposedly panicked, believing aliens had actually landed. The story of mass hysteria became legend. Newspapers reported traffic jams, people fleeing their homes, and others praying for the end of the world. But here's the twist: most of those reports were exaggerated. The actual number of panicked listeners was far smaller. Still, the myth stuck. Why? Because it revealed something chilling, that media could shape public perception so powerfully that people might mistake fiction for reality. Whether or not millions panicked, the story became a cautionary tale, proof that a broadcast could control the masses. And in today's world of fake news and viral hoaxes, that myth feels more relevant than ever. In the 1950s, Hollywood faced the Red Scare. Actors, writers, and directors accused of communist ties were placed on secret blacklists, supposedly ending their careers overnight. The myth is that the blacklist destroyed everyone it touched. In truth, while many did suffer, some managed to keep working under pseudonyms or through friends who fronted for them. The blacklist was devastating, but it wasn't an absolute death sentence. Still, the myth has overshadowed the reality. leaving the impression of a witch hunt so powerful that it wiped entire generations out of Hollywood. That narrative shaped how we view censorship, politics, and art to this very day. And the chilling lesson remains: fear and rumor can silence even the most creative voices. And finally, the most famous myth of them all, that the 1969 Apollo moon landing was staged on a Hollywood set. Conspiracy theorists point to shadows in the footage, the waving American flag, and supposed hidden studio lights as proof it was all fake. Despite overwhelming scientific evidence, moon rocks, satellite images, testimony from astronauts and missions since, the conspiracy still lingers. Polls show millions of people remain convinced the US government pulled off the greatest hoax in history. Why does this myth matter? Because it planted seeds of distrust in institutions, media, and science. Every modern conspiracy theory, from flat Earth to fake pandemics, owes something to the moon hoax. It's not just a myth about space, it's a myth that changed how humanity views truth itself. Which myth shocked you the most, and do you secretly believe any of them? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more untold stories of history and pop culture. Because remember, sometimes the myths are just as powerful as the truth.